Welcome to Life Stories, where sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who raised you. Imagine building $1 million life in silence, just to prove to the family who ignored you that you were never invisible. What happens when success doesn't bring pride but resentment? When love comes with invoices and being the strong one means being left behind? This is the story of a woman who spent her entire life trying to be seen, until one Thanksgiving dinner, a single moment shattered the silence, and everything changed. It's raw, it's real, and it will challenge everything you think you know about family, forgiveness, and self-worth. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear might just mirror something buried inside you. Let's begin. Brooklyn Morgan had always known how to disappear. Not in the literal sense. Her presence was undeniable, a sharp-boned girl with storm-colored eyes and hair that caught sunlight like spilled ink, but in the kind that grows in houses with too many closed doors. By the time she was 10, she had mastered the art of quiet exits, unread emotions, and smiling just enough to pass unnoticed. She grew up in a modest, wood-framed house nestled in a Colorado suburb where porches were painted in pastels and everyone knew what everyone else had for dinner. Her father was a physics teacher at the local high school. Her mother, a night shift nurse, moved like a phantom through the house, visible mostly in scent and shadow. For years, Brooklyn thought they were happy, or, at the very least, functional. Her earliest memories were wrapped in warmth. Fireflies, ice cream on the porch, the soft buzz of cicadas humming against the silence of summer. That illusion cracked the night Zoe was born. Brooklyn remembered the headlights first, slicing through the snow-drenched dark like some celestial warning. Then the knock. Hard, fast, repeated. Aunt Melissa rushed in with panic stitched across her face, her voice trembling as she told Brooklyn to pack a bag. "Your mom's at the hospital. The baby came early. Really early." Zoe entered the world 2 months premature, a tiny bundle of lungs and wires and near-invisible skin. From that moment on, the house Brooklyn once belonged to became a hospital wing she had no clearance to enter. Sanitizers occupied every room. Air purifiers buzzed like wasps. The air stung of bleach and distance. Brooklyn wasn't even allowed to touch her. "She can't risk getting sick," her mother would say, eyes glued to the monitor, her hands shooing Brooklyn away like a stray breeze. One afternoon, Brooklyn came home clutching her first perfect score on a math test. Her mother glanced at the paper, then asked if they had run out of tissues for Zoe. That was the first time she realized she was no longer the daughter. They'd replaced her with something more fragile, something more sacred. As Zoe grew stronger, Brooklyn grew quieter. No matter how high she climbed, no one looked up. Not when she won the state science fair. Not when her essays were praised by teachers. Not even when she worked at Beckett's Bakehouse every afternoon to afford college applications, ones she submitted without her parents ever knowing. Mrs. Beckett, the bakery's owner, had once said while handing her a paycheck, "You've got an old soul, Brooklyn. People like us. No one hands us things. We earn them quietly." And quietly she did. She got into Northwestern on a full ride. She built a career appraising antique jewelry, founded Sable and Iris, and grew it from a 2-person operation into a multi-million-dollar enterprise with offices in 3 cities. Yet, back home, her family still believed she was just dabbling in vintage stuff. She never corrected them. Maybe she was waiting. Maybe she wanted to believe they'd one day see her without needing a spectacle. Maybe a part of her still wanted a gold star on the fridge, a pat on the back, a simple, "We're proud of you." But what she got instead was silence, until Thanksgiving. That year, her mother called, sounding fragile. "I haven't been well. Everyone's looking forward to the holiday. You understand." So Brooklyn catered the entire dinner from a private chef team in Chicago. Every dish was a work of art, every detail curated, not to impress, but to finally feel present, to take up space, to stop shrinking. Then Zoe barged into her room asking for a charger. She saw the open laptop on Brooklyn's desk. Bank account, $12.6 million. Pending authentication contract, $400,000. quarterly earnings, 4.3 million. Zoe didn't ask questions. She grabbed the laptop and carried it to the dining room like a grenade. "Hey guys, look what Brooklyn's doing on Thanksgiving," she sang. The silence was deafening. Brooklyn stood up, walked to the center of the room, and finally, told the truth. "I'm the CEO of Sable and Iris. What you see is mine. I've been funding this family for years. Zoe's tuition, your mortgage payments, emergency bills. You just never thought to ask where the help came from." Her father turned pale. Her mother trembled. Zoe cried. And not a single person said, "We're proud of you." Instead, her mother whispered, voice sharp like ice cracking, "You've had this kind of money, and you let us struggle?" Brooklyn looked around the table. People who once ignored her, now shocked not by her success, but by the fact she didn't hand it to them in gift wrap. No one hugged her. No one smiled. No one saw the girl who had once just wanted to be noticed. Just then, Aunt Melissa stood slowly from the corner chair. The room turned to her, but she didn't look at anyone. She walked to Brooklyn, placed a hand on her shoulder, and said softly, "I always knew." Brooklyn blinked. "Knew what?" "That you were going to shine so bright they'd need to squint." And for the first time in years, Brooklyn let herself cry. Not out of sadness, but because someone had finally seen her. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? What would you do if the people you loved only saw your worth once they could measure it in dollars? But that was only the beginning. Because what came next would force Brooklyn to make a choice no one saw coming. Continue reading in part 2. After the Thanksgiving fallout, Brooklyn didn't go home for weeks. She told herself it was because she was busy, wrapping up a multi-state authentication project, onboarding a new client in London, and preparing for the Paris conference next spring. But deep down, she knew she was stalling. The truth was, she didn't know what to feel. Not anger, exactly. Not grief either. What filled her was something heavier, quieter. A kind of mourning that came not from death, but from the slow, agonizing realization that the people she'd once tried so hard to earn love from had never seen her clearly to begin with. And now they had, and it changed nothing. One night, she sat in her new home, glass of wine in one hand, her grandmother's old swan hairpin in the other, watching the mist curl over Lake Evergreen like ghost smoke. Her phone vibrated on the table, lighting up with a name she hadn't seen in weeks, Zoe. For a long time, she didn't move. Then, curiosity won. The message was short. "Can we talk?" Against her better judgment, Brooklyn agreed to meet at a cafe downtown. Public, neutral, safe. When Zoe walked in, she looked different. The usual effortless gloss was gone. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, no makeup, eyes swollen. Brooklyn didn't know if it was an act, but part of her didn't care. Zoe sat without asking, fingers wrapped tightly around a lukewarm cup of coffee. "I'm not here to fight," she said quickly. I didn't know. About anything." Brooklyn arched an eyebrow. "Didn't know what? That I wasn't just folding scarves and sipping soup for the last decade?" Zoe winced. "I didn't know you were alone." Brooklyn blinked. "I always thought you were the strong one," Zoe continued. "That you wanted space. That you didn't need attention." Brooklyn let out a small laugh. "That's because Mom kept telling everyone I was the independent one. You ever wonder why?" "Because you were." "No," Brooklyn said, voice sharp. "Because they didn't have the emotional capacity to love more than one child at a time, and I made it easy for them." Silence. Then Zoe spoke, softer this time. "Why didn't you ever correct them?" Brooklyn looked down at her cup. "Because I thought if I just waited long enough, did enough, became enough, they'd notice on their own." Zoe sat back, her eyes glistening. "I'm sorry." It hit differently this time. Not the dramatic kind of apology with tears and theatrics. Just a quiet sentence, floating in the air like a fragile thing that might break if Brooklyn responded too quickly. But she didn't, because she'd learned that apologies, like antiques, needed to be examined carefully. Was it authentic, or just another polished replica? A week later, Brooklyn received an email from her mother. The subject line read, "Important, regarding Zoe." She didn't open it right away. When she finally did, the words didn't surprise her. They simply confirmed what she had already started to fear. Zoe was dropping out. Again. And her parents wanted Brooklyn to help her open a boutique design studio just until she finds her footing. They even attached a proposal: branding, location suggestions, projected costs, and a budget request. $150,000. Brooklyn stared at the screen, bile rising in her throat. It wasn't the money, it was the audacity. The complete lack of recognition that she might not want to rescue them this time, that she might not owe them a second chance. She didn't reply. 3 days later, her father called. Then her mother. Then Zoe. The voicemail started with concern, then shifted into guilt, then shame. "You wouldn't be where you are if we hadn't taught you discipline," her father said in one. "She's your sister, Brooklyn," her mother begged in another. "She needs you." But the one that cut deepest came late one night, almost a whisper on the line. Zoe. "You were right," she said. "I don't know what it's like to build something, but I know what it's like to watch you walk away, and I'm scared I'm never going to see you again." Brooklyn sat frozen on her kitchen floor, the phone pressed to her ear long after the message ended, because that's when the guilt finally slithered in. The guilt they had spent decades building into her bones. The same guilt that told her love had to be earned through sacrifice. That self-worth wasn't about what you built, but how much you gave away to keep everyone else standing. It came back with a vengeance. And for the first time in years, she cracked. She didn't cry. She shook, shaking from the weight of always being the solution. The ATM, the proof that they had done something right, even if they never acknowledged it aloud. She stumbled to her desk, opened her laptop, hovered over her business account. One click, one transfer. It would be so easy. But just before she confirmed the transaction, her eyes caught the blue velvet box on the shelf. The hairpin. The swan. Grandma's words. It's not the rare item. It's the girl who sees it as treasure. And suddenly, Brooklyn saw it for what it was. This wasn't about money. It was about permission. They had never given her permission to be loved without conditions. So she had spent her life begging for scraps, disguised as approval. She closed the laptop, and this time, she didn't open it again. What would you do if helping someone you love meant betraying the person you finally become? Because when Brooklyn made her decision, she had no idea just how far her family would go to take back the power she no longer offered. Stay with us. Part 3 will take you even deeper into the storm. The morning Brooklyn finally changed her number. It was snowing. Not the poetic kind of snow, the light, swirling flurries that made you pause and smile. No, this was the kind that fell in thick, stubborn silence. The kind that muted everything. She watched it blanket the streets outside her office window, muffling car horns, footsteps, voices, a city full of sound suddenly holding its breath. It felt fitting. Her attorney, Marcus, had already sent the final cease and desist letters. Not that she took pleasure in it, but there was only so long you could carry people who mistook your kindness for a vault they were entitled to crack open whenever it suited them. Still, it wasn't anger she felt. It was something more hollow. The ache that comes from knowing a door you once waited at for years will never open again, and now you're the one who's locked it. Then came the knock, soft, 3 times, followed by silence. No one ever used the front entrance of Sable and Iris without an appointment. Brooklyn stood slowly, heart thudding, not from fear but recognition. She crossed the office, opened the door. It was Zoe, soaked through, coat open, tears already falling. Brooklyn didn't say anything, just stepped aside. Inside, Zoe sank into one of the chairs by the window, shivering as she whispered, "I'm not here to ask for anything." Brooklyn stayed quiet, unsure if she believed that anymore. "I got your letter," Zoe said, pulling a folded piece of paper from her coat. "The cease and desist. I read it 100 times. Then I saw the necklace." Brooklyn frowned. "What necklace?" "Your grandmother's, the one you posted on the gallery's site. You wrote that it wasn't the pearl that made it valuable. It was the memory it held." Brooklyn's throat tightened. She had written that caption months ago. For herself, not for anyone else to see beneath the surface. Zoe's voice shook. I lied, Brooklyn. Not just about the money or about what I said at the party. I lied to myself. I thought you had everything, that you were cold, distant, but the truth is, I never once asked what you gave up to survive all those years. I never saw it. A pause, and now I do. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Snow kept falling outside the window like a curtain the world had drawn closed around them. Inside, it was warm. Still. I'm not proud of how I treated you, Zoe said finally. And I'm not proud of how Mom and Dad turned your silence into proof you didn't need anything. But I came to say this, and I'll leave if you want me to after. Brooklyn turned her face slightly toward her, eyes unreadable. I'm not asking for your help. I'm asking for your forgiveness. Brooklyn felt the world pause. Not the loud, dramatic kind of pause. The quiet shift that comes when a wound stops bleeding just long enough to let the skin breathe. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood, walked to the shelf behind her desk, and opened a drawer. She pulled out a small velvet box, blue, soft-edged, and set it gently on the table between them. I kept this for years, she said. It's the first piece I ever considered beautiful. Not because of its value, but because someone once handed it to me when I felt like nothing. Zoe looked down at the box, but didn't open it. I don't know if we'll ever be what we used to pretend we were, Brooklyn continued. But I know what it feels like to carry silence for so long it turns to stone. And if this is the beginning of letting go of some of it, maybe that's enough. Zoe opened the box. Inside was the swan-shaped hairpin. Pale lavender stones, delicate and quiet like the girl who had once hidden in her own house, trying to feel real. Tears spilled from Zoe's eyes. Brooklyn stood, walked over, and sat beside her. They didn't say much after that. They didn't need to. 2 weeks later, their mother was admitted to the hospital. Nothing critical. A minor cardiac episode. Stress-induced, the doctor said. Brooklyn flew to Denver. Not because anyone asked, not because she was expected, but because deep down, even wounded things deserve closure. She arrived to find her father sitting by the bedside, worn and quiet. For the first time in years, he didn't look like the man who held authority over her childhood. He just looked tired. She keeps asking for you, he said without meeting her eyes. Brooklyn walked in. Her mother blinked, visibly startled. Then she smiled. Small, unsure, more human than Brooklyn had ever seen her. I didn't think you'd come, she whispered. I wasn't sure I would, Brooklyn replied. They didn't talk about the money, or the betrayals, or the years of praise withheld. Instead, they talked about the lavender irises that used to grow behind the house, about Brooklyn's old bedroom that still smelled faintly of peppermint, about the time her mother stayed up late brushing knots from her hair before her first day of school. Tiny things, unimportant things, but somehow they mattered more than the big ones. Before she left, Brooklyn reached into her purse and placed a single envelope on the nightstand. No name, no note, just a check. Not for $150,000. Not even for 10. It was for exactly $1, the cost of a fresh beginning, if they chose to earn it. She never told Zoe. Never told Marcus. Not even her grandmother. Some things, she realized, were meant to be given quietly. By spring, Brooklyn's firm had expanded to London and Vancouver. Her collection was on display at the Metropolitan Museum's Spring Gala. She stood in a midnight blue dress beside her team, smiling as camera flashes lit up the room. Across the exhibit hall, she saw Zoe standing alone, wearing a simple black dress and no makeup. She wasn't speaking to anyone, just looking at a necklace in the case, an antique with hand-cut sapphires. Brooklyn approached her from behind. You like it? Zoe turned, smiled. It's beautiful. Brooklyn nodded. You know what makes it rare? Zoe shook her head. Brooklyn leaned closer. It's not the stones, it's the fact that it survived 4 generations of being lost. They both turned to look at the piece again. And in that quiet space between past and present, between what was taken and what was given, something began to heal. Not with fireworks, not with applause, but with the kind of silence that no longer hurt, the kind that simply meant, I see you now. What did this ending mean to you, and how did it make you feel about Brooklyn's journey? If you loved this story, comment 100 below to let us know. Tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to connect with our global readers. And don't forget to share this story with someone who needs it. Thank you for being here with us at Life Stories.